What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to episode 2. What's up, guys? I'm your boy, Angel M. Jr., and welcome to the stream. We are going to be looking at a few things today, and it all ties in at the end. So, first things first, welcome again. Welcome to episode 2. I appreciate all the support for episode 1, all the love and feedback in the comments. Love y'all. Today's going to be a little bit more interesting. I felt like what I talked about episode 1 was kind of blah. But it was a nice introductory to who I am as a person and the mindset that I bring to the table. And, I love... Today's topic, let me just say this. Today's topic is accountability. And accountability is a word that I didn't really understand the value of it until I was a little older. And that I know in most cases that's just that's just the case in most people's lives. It's let's be honest. And most times that word comes up when you're guilty of something. That word comes up when, you've done things that you weren't very proud of, and then people hold you accountable. And what we see in today's society is the outward cry for people to take accountability is disproportionate to the number of people that take accountability. So I'll rephrase that, in case, somebody got confused with what I just said. There's a disproportionate number of people that are forcing accountability on others, yet not taking accountability themselves. Okay? I'm not even talking about maybe that same person, that same individual who's trying to hold somebody else accountable, yet they're not taking accountability. That's not always necessarily the case, because sometimes that person is accountable. They're just also holding other people to that same standard. But what we've seen in today's society, especially with things that are going on just now, we're seeing this disconnect between what responsibility is and what accountability is. People are like holding other people accountable, but they're not holding themselves accountable. That number is very disproportionate. It's very easy to point the finger at other people, but it's very hard to point the finger at yourself. So, first topic of today, we're going to be talking about the Snow White failure. I'm not going to get too deep into it. I just want to kind of brush the surface on the key points of what we're seeing blatantly in the media and also like just in society as a whole is a unnerving amount of hypocrisy in the world right now, where you got people that are pointing the finger and saying, it's not my fault that this movie failed, it's your fault for not being supportive enough of, my cause. And without getting too political, because I don't want to start shit, but I'm just saying that what's going on right now is, you have an actress and a group of them within that genre of filmmaking that they want to rewrite history to their own image. And it's not a good thing. I think that, if you are living in a family that has a really bad history and you want to rewrite the history, I think that's a bad thing. I think what you need to do is build from that history and make it better. If you got, let's say, this is kind of an extreme example, but let's say you have a family that has domestic violence in their history, right? And this is like your grandpa, your great grandma, or whatever. Like you can tie that domestic violence, to a very, very long line in your family history. Break the cycle. Don't try to rewrite nothing, because what happens is, like, as human beings, every time we try to rewrite history, it always goes bad. Every single time. There hasn't been a single case where you're like, oh, you know what? That actually worked out, by forgetting about this. I was like, no, you can't forget about your mistakes because you can't do nothing about them. There's nothing you could do about them. You literally have to go back in time to fix those things. So you need to just stop the cycle, you know? And for all these rewrites that are happening, especially over the last 20 years, you start seeing a lot of failures, a lot of flops. It just became like a regular thing every year to see like 4 or 5 major movies just completely flop. And then nobody thought this through at all. Like, there's this delusional disconnect between what real is and like what like and what fake is. Like one of my favorite quotes that I heard recently was, I don't trust someone based on the color of their skin or where they come from and all like that. I just trust real and I trust fake. Like I that's how I view the world, is between real and fake. I don't care about color. And that for me was incredibly important, especially the other thing too is like gender. Doesn't matter. It's like I respect real and I respect fake. Like, I can see the difference between the two, and it allows me to have the wisdom to choose the right one, especially in whatever I'm doing. So this actress has been completely off the rails, but I don't think she wanted to be on the rails to begin with. You could tell, like, her demeanor has been that way for a long time, and we just started noticing that because this film actually, it was supposed to mean something, so that's why we know of her, because most people didn't know who she was before this. She wasn't like a mainstream, A-list or nothing like that. So she wants to be that. The problem is there's a disconnect between what she wants and needs and what she thinks she wants and needs right now. So she's saying all these things that are not making any sense and being very degrading to other people. Very self-centered. One of the things that stuck out to me the most was that she had said something about that, who knows, maybe this guy, the prince's lines will, and scenes will all get cut and it's just going to be me. Like, even joking like that's a rough joke, especially when you're not really a funny person to begin with. If somebody like Dave Chappelle would have said that, or, someone, Nikki Glaser, for example, Nikki Glaser, if she would have said something like that, it would have been, we know her as, like, she has a reputation of funny, so that's different. But somebody like this that is like Broadway, and like, they're not necessarily considered funny people. Not saying that they aren't, but that's not what they're known for. So if that was meant to be a joke, I think that she did a horrible job of delivering it, because you gotta, one, have context, and two, you gotta have rapport with whoever you're talking to, and she doesn't have rapport with her audience the way she thinks. The meaning of the failure of Snow White is monumentous. Jesus, I can't even talk right now. Monumental, excuse me. Because it shows where the world is at. Like, we are tired of being force-fed a certain agenda. We just want to watch a movie for entertainment. If we want to watch something that is educational, I'm going to go to National Geographic. I'm going to go to, Discovery Channel, History Channel. I'm going to go to those. Like, if I want to watch something entertaining, especially a remake of something that we all loved as kids, like, I want to enjoy it. I'm super excited for Lilo and Stitch. That's one movie that I absolutely loved as a kid, and watching the trailer was one of my, like, the best experiences recently in watching trailers, because it reminded me of how much fun I had rewatching that as a kid on VHS DVD. Back in the day when I, with my brothers and whatnot, we would rewatch that movie so many times because it's so much fun to watch. The visual effects are amazing. If you guys haven't watched the original, I highly recommend it. A great story. I know a lot of younger kids might not know, maybe heard of it, but they never watched it. But I highly recommend it. I grew up with that, and it's just so funny. But yeah, that's what the meaning of that failure of the movie, that flop, is that you have this disconnect between the elite and the 99% population of the world that is just like, we don't relate to you because you don't relate to us. We don't make that much money, so we don't know what type of environment you guys live in. But you started to see, I'm not gonna name the cases, but you guys know what I'm talking about, in recent cases where you start to see like, oh, I had no idea this person was doing this behind closed doors. All these different things that are happening and leaking into the world, it's meant to do that. It's meant to create division, and it's meant to, show you this is what's going on, for years and years, and you had no idea. Imagine what you still don't know. That's scary, but at the same time, you got to just embrace your family, embrace your reality, and appreciate what you got, because people want, they want to win that $1 million. They want to win the lottery. And I was like, dude, it's not all, what it's cracked up to be. So, you need to like understand where you are and just appreciate that you ain't got those problems. And I'm not saying that you should think of yourself as better than them. Just be glad that you're not them in this moment, and just appreciate where you're at. Another thing too to talk about is like, you have these layers of society, which I kind of alluded to. You see Katy Perry and you see what's happening with that situation. I like to think of, like my best example of explaining what I want to talk about right now is, if you think about the atmospheric layers of Jupiter and how thick that is before you can even get to the actual planet itself. That's what society is. You have this disconnect between that top layer and all the way at the bottom, where you have, the surface of the planet, which what I would metaphorically allude to is the 99%ers, which is us, the people that run the earth, not govern it. We live our lives day to day. We drink polluted water at times. Sometimes we have one shoe on one foot and not the other. It goes from that poverty all the way to people that own their own little family business that make $200K a year, and help their communities out and whatever way they you got pizza shops, you got family owned tax return places that help you with your taxes. You got people that work at Walmart, which was I was one of those. You got people that are business administrative people that work in high tech firms and make $100K a year, but they live amongst, like, we live with each other, we coexist. So even if you might not, a $50,000 a year person might not be able to relate to like a $20,000 a year person or 100,000. Like, we all drive the same roads, we all live in the same neighborhoods, or at least within a 20 or 50-mile radius, in that neighborhood of people, in that group of people, that culture of people. Even if we don't agree with each other, we rather coexist with each other than what the hell is going on in the elites, in that 1%ers, because there's just so much going on that we were just like, what is happening with, we can't believe the media, we have no idea what's happening. But all these different things start going on, and you see police reports and whatnot, and whether or not you believe a lot of police activity or whatever, the reality is now when it becomes a legal matter, it becomes an official documented thing, not just a conspiracy. And you're trying to figure out what is going on. People are rapping about things that they know about. You got the Cat Williams interview this year that kind of just blew up the internet, and we're starting to see things that are going on, and then he predicted things that happened, and a few months later it did happen, and we're just what is this truth that we're seeing? And we're very thankful for people like Cat Williams, who are real people in a fake society, and they're feeding us information. He's feeding us the truth in any way that he can, because he doesn't want to be a part of them. He just wants to enjoy his success without having to sell his soul, so we got to respect that, so when you look at that disconnect, all those different layers, you're not going to be able to communicate, with the layer above you, or at least in a way that they'll understand or you'll understand, because we have different languages. Those people that live in the 1%, they have their own atmosphere. They have their own world, and they think that that's the real world. But most of them have never lived, or they're so far gone from where they used to be, the poor person or whatever, or like lower middle class, whatever, like in that group of people. I'll say even upper class, because upper class, like we have people that I live around that are upper class, but they're regular people. They're not insanely successful where they're just like completely oblivious to the fact that you got to pay for electricity. I remember a Mariah Carey clip where she has like, you got to pay for electricity. He's like, yeah, like that's delusional, because they don't know. They're so ignorant to what's actually happening in the world. It's very scary because we like share a species with them. Like, what is happening? I can't understand that at all. Like, how can you go from being someone who's and I'm not necessarily talking about her, but that's just a quote that I remember that she had said, and people were like incredulous that she said that. Like, how do you not know that we pay for electricity? But there's people that live on this planet that don't really live on this planet. Like they're so alien to what actual living has been in the regular population. And I'd say just be glad if you're watching this and you're someone that has and I wasn't trying to talk bad about any job, but if you work in that regular job, just be thankful that you don't have those issues, that you have a family that supports you, you have friends and all that stuff. And if you don't have those things, you're still part of that world. You're not part of that delusionalist society that thinks everything is perfect, that you can buy everything with money, and you can't get pulled over because they know who you are. You have this unlimited protection because you sold your soul a long time ago, so you're protected for the next 10 years or whatever. So you feel invincible. You do whatever you want because there's no consequences. Then all of a sudden the consequences start popping up, and that's why I talk about accountability today. The disconnect between real people and the delusional people is growing every single day. Like, that gap is growing, and it's scary because these people that have no idea that they have a disconnect with us as a general population. Well, they govern the place, dude. Like, they go to all these banquets that we don't know about, that they're invited. It's a private party or whatever, and they're like donating money. They're doing all these different things to help certain people get elected, or they're being they're dipping their fingers in all these different political things, not just in our country, but in other countries as well, that they're running the place and or they're governing. And it's like, why are we allowing that to happen? I have no idea. I think people would much rather be ignorant, live their own lives, and then die at the end of it with with their passing down whatever they have to the next generation, and just not worrying about it because they ain't got to worry about it no more. I think that's most of us, and I can relate to that too, man. That shit is it's a scary thing to even think about. But the core issue is accountability, because people don't know how to be accountable, yet they like to hold other people responsible, right? The Snow White chick, she just doesn't take accountability for the fact that she's been incredibly condescending to the general population, to over 50% of viewers that maybe not have the same political views as she does, because she had said some things about the Republican Party and people in it. I'm not going to mention it, you guys can look that up, but her continuously going, well, we didn't do well because society failed us. We didn't do well in the movie because society has chosen the other side. And hope you guys can sleep at night knowing that you allowed a perfectly good movie to fail, instead of going like, what, you're right. Like, this movie was pretty trash. Because it's like, if she was in Broadway, so it's like, okay, if your play does bad, you can't blame the people there, like, that come to watch it or don't come to watch it. Well, if it was bad, they're not going to come to the next one. Like, as a Broadway show and as a production, like, you have to It's not cater. It's not about catering to the viewers. What it is being genuine. People like real. They don't like fake. It's like the only time we like fake, I think, is like if you're watching like anime and stuff like that. It's like it's blatantly obvious that it's supposed to be that way. It's written that way. But when you're doing a remake of something that already happened, like it's a remake of a movie that made Disney the way that it is, you're crapping all over that 90 years of history for what? Like, what's your goal? It doesn't make any sense. You're just power hungry. You want to be the solution instead of allowing, people would. I think here's the thing: people would have cared more about the film had they gone. All right, we're gonna hire little people to represent the dwarves and the seven dwarves and Snow White. We're gonna hire an actress to play Snow White that cares about the values of the movie, of what's already there. The script is already there. People worked hard on that script. People worked hard on that story and the animation. For you to 90 years later completely take a crap on their work. And it wasn't like the movie was racist or anything like that. Like when they first made it, it wasn't sexist by any means. It was a love story, and it's a story. It's not a history, you know. But she decided to take it upon herself to completely destroy it single-handedly almost. And obviously they talked about Gal Gadot not being the greatest actress. And to be honest with you, I didn't really notice that she was like a terrible actress because I'm not, because I think it's like as a man, like I think she's gorgeous and she's a very professional woman. I've never seen her make a statement that I would be like, oh my god, I completely disagree with, or distasteful, distasteful comments that she avoids. She tries to she does her best, in my opinion, to avoid problems. And this girl that she's basically co-starring with in this film is like doing the exact opposite. So I know that they're trying to drag Gal Gadot through the mud a little bit on that, but also she hasn't really said much, and it's on purpose. She's a mature woman. She understands her place in society. She knows that she's beautiful, and but she does have physical talents that allowed her to play the roles that she plays. Now, obviously, in this role, that you don't really need a physical talent, but she's tall. She got dark hair. She got a lighter complexion, so she kind of fits the mold. I think obviously we have other actresses that could have played that role better, but you're just trying to get clicks. You're trying to get views, and Gal Gadot is, one of the hottest things. Things. Sorry about that. One of the hottest commodities in terms of filmmaking, because she exploded with with Wonder Woman, but even right before that she was in Fast and Furious. So like having her is like it adds value to the film. And that's why they have her there. And obviously there's a whole situation with all that, they're like, oh, she was horrible, but it's like the only reason you're talking about her is because of the Snow White character, being played the way that it's like. If the movie was better, if maybe if Gal Gadot was the worst thing, that movie would have done really, really well. But that's not the case. Like, I feel like she's taken some some side shots for no reason. It's just like, she didn't do nothing, man. Like, she could have done a better job, sure, but she doesn't have much range anyway. And if you look at, like, I was talking to my wife about this before, it's like, culturally speaking, like, that's in her culture, and especially with how she was raised and like her background, it makes sense that she's, as tall as she is, as athletic as she is, and that she's good at the action role, because that is where she was brought up. That is, like, you don't know women in her culture to be very emotional. They're very rational. They're very, like, to the point. They're professional, and they do their job. They don't make excuses. That's how she is. So I mean, and if you look at like the witch or queen or whatever you want to call her in Snow White, well, she's basically the same thing. It's just that people wanted her to be a little bit more convincing of her evilness, which Gal, I don't think she's really played any like evil roles per se. I can't think of anything right now. Maybe she has, but I haven't seen all of her movies. I've just seen like Wonder Woman, Fast and Furious. Then there was one where she was like a secret agent or something like that. But anyways, yeah. So there's this accountability factor that we gotta like really look at as a society and how we're doing things, because you gotta look at, first of all, it starts with your life. You know, making sure that you're accountable for your things and accountable for, you know, what you should be accountable for, and don't pass the buck. You know, you start to see that, and I will say this: there's people that have never taken accountability. Then there's people that have taken a lot of accountability in their life, but they got so tired of making mistakes that they started making excuses. And then there's people that will continuously make mistakes and they've accepted that, but they continuously make it kind of like they're still accountable for their actions. So they're trying to get better. And I think the large part of the population is actually in the middle there, because people generally, you know what, I'm sorry, my bad, like, but then there's only so much that somebody can take of being criticized for mistakes. You know, because most people want people just to be like, when I make a mistake, I don't want anyone pointing it out, right? That's just common knowledge. But the thing is, I don't want you guys to be afraid of making mistakes. Saying something you don't mean, just take accountability for it right then and there. I had someone, I just talked about this last night. I had someone come up to me a few years back saying that I had said some really mean things to them in high school. And I hadn't seen them since high school, actually. And but I recognized them, and I said hello, and I remember their body language was kind of like hesitant. They were looking at me like, so I thought they didn't recognize me. But that's not what happened in their mind. What was happening in their mind was that's like, I'm surprised you're saying anything to me, because I didn't think you liked me. Right? That was what actually happened. So, or what they actually thought. Because what happened next was, I introduced myself, and, because I thought that they didn't recognize me, but they did say, yeah, I know who you are. And then when they said that, my tone changed mentally. I'm like, oh shit, they didn't want to see me, or they didn't expect me to say hello. So then, they go, hey, yeah, I've been good, I do this, I do that. I got some kids, got married. I'm like, oh, dude, awesome, man. I just got married. At that point, it would have been like the 2 years before. I said, oh, dude, congratulations. Where'd you guys meet? And we talked about that. And then in the middle of the conversation, kind of shifted to something a little bit more serious, where he goes, hey, listen, I want to, I got to get going here in a little bit, but I might not see you again, because we don't know what our paths are going to take. Right? And we haven't really seen each other since high school, so it doesn't really make sense for me to give you my number. But I just want to say this. You had said something to me a long time ago, and it really stuck with me for a while. And I just want to say that I forgave you for that. Now, old me would have asked him, well, what did I say? Instead of what I did say now, because I am mature now as a person, and I know that it doesn't matter what I said. Don't worry about things that don't matter. Get to the facts. The fact is, he was hurt by something I said, and he specifically pointed, like, the way he said it, it didn't sound like he was faking anything or trying to get attention or whatever. He sounded very hurt, and he sounded like genuine. So I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, whatever it was, I'm sorry, right? So he's in the middle of talking and telling me that I had said something about his parents, but he understood that I didn't know that they had passed away a few years before that scenario. So And I in my head, with the way he was talking, in my head I was thinking, I was like, I would have said something, because I had a phase where I would be like, your mom, your mom, like, just stupid, stupid shit. So he had talked about it, and it really hurt, because I thought that you knew that my parents had passed away, and that you were saying that in front of other people, um, to like hurt me or whatever, because you heard that I liked one of your exes. And I told him this. I said verbatim, I'm like, you know what, dude? I am so sorry of whatever I said to you, and I don't mean that as dismissive. I can't remember that particular moment. However, I can remember that people were saying or were rumoring that I didn't like you because you were dating one of my exes, or liked them. It's like, I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I could care less at that time. I promise you, I didn't care about that. But I am sorry for what I said to you that made you feel that certain type of way for however many years, and I take full accountability for it. The dude, for whatever reason, he like he was holding a one of those Walmart baskets. He bent down, dropped the basket, and I thought, wow, this motherfucker's gonna punch me because I'm thinking he wants to fight because he thinks I'm being dismissive. And no, dude, the motherfucker gave me a hug, man. And I'm like, oh, dude, man. And like I said, I'm sorry, bro. Like, and I just kept apologizing to him. I'm like, I'm so glad that you forgave me. I appreciate it. I've gone through some things in my life recently that have opened my eyes to things that I may or may not have done in the past that I can't even remember, because I was so depressed for so long that I have blotches of memories, that, or even events that I can't even remember. I can't remember what I was doing. I must have been on autopilot, because that's what I was. So even as a kid, like, it's just the way that it was for me. So, I'm happy for him, but this is what I was talking about with accountability, is like, if somebody goes up to you and says, something you said 3 years ago, whatever, you don't say, well, fucking get over it, dude. Get the fuck out of my face. Don't do that. This is an opportunity for you to connect with somebody that you don't know what they're going through. You could be saving a life at the very least. And you don't know what type of ripple effects you're having with everything that you do. Everything you have your fingers in will create a ripple in your life. Everything, from work, from school, from being a dad, being a son, a brother, a husband. Everything you do creates a ripple in that person's life, or the people's lives that are in that ripple. And you have to, like, create a good one. I'm not perfect. I made a lot of mistakes in my life. But one thing that I have been taught is to take accountability and stop making excuses. Because excuses is like, if your mom tells you to clean your room one day, right? And you clean your room by throwing everything under the bed. If you do that for a month, you do it for 2 months, or 3 months, and then your mom finds out that for 3 months you have just been stuffing things under your bed, well, guess what you got to do? Eventually, you got to bring all that stuff you put under your bed, you got to bring it to the light. And now you got to wash all that, you got to fold all that, and it's going to take you like 4 or 5 hours when it could have just taken you 5 minutes, 10 minutes each time you did it. So it's like with your life, don't push things around. Don't make it somebody else's problem. Because eventually it's going to come right back to you, and you got to do it. You got to deal with it, and I know I talked about it in episode 1 about, like, the girl that had accused me of stuff at work, right? Well, even to the end, she didn't take accountability. And look, she lost her job because she got caught sleeping on the job. It's and then, like I said, she texted the foreman and was like, hey, by the way, thank that driver that got me fired. It's like, you understand that your performance got you fired, lack thereof. It's like, it had nothing to do with the driver. He did what he knew, and he radioed it in, hey, like, I know I'm scheduled for a test, but she's sleeping in the truck. Like, do I get out of my truck to wake her up or what? It's like, yeah, wake her up because you gotta get tested. And this dude had to get out of his truck, which I don't know if you guys know what ready mix trucks are. That whole concrete. It's kind of hard to get out of that truck. It's a little cockpit. You're sitting in the middle, so if you got to get out, you got to climb out there, climb down the ladder, go over to her truck, hit the window, And then he hit the window pretty hard because she just would not wake up. And it's just like, dude, you ain't got to be doing all that. He doesn't have to be doing all that. He could have just been like, fuck it, I'm out of here, man. I'm not dealing with this. I don't get paid for this to wake people up at work. It's like, and then we had people that kept making excuses for her too. They're like, oh, she worked overnight. But she didn't work overnight that night. That whole week, she didn't work overnight. So again, and then now this is affecting not only her professional life, but it's affecting her personal life. Because now she can't use any of the references at the job because she got fired from it. And there's nobody that's willing to put their name out because they know how she is already. So not only that, now your next job is going to be harder to get. And the last job was hard to get to begin with. Because at the last job, before I helped her get to this one that she just lost 3 years later, she was over there for 3 years, then over here for 3 years. Now the company's going to be like, well, you got to let go of both of them. And you got 3 kids. You just kept talking about the fact that you don't understand, I'm a single mom, blah, 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 blah. It's just like, but you're not taking accountability for you. You keep making excuses and you're just going to keep pushing it off the road. And here's the other thing too. That when you make excuses, it's like pushing a snowball down the hill. But you're also at the bottom of the hill. So you're at the top of the hill pushing a snowball, but you're pushing it into yourself. Because eventually you have to deal with your own lack of accountability. And I found that out the hard way, my mid-20s was littered with problems because I kept keeping secrets and pushing off accountability, making excuses, calling in all the time, making excuses, and eventually it caught up to me, and I had to deal with it. I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this shit no more. I don't want to because making excuses is exhausting. You got to hold up a bunch of different masks. You got to figure out, in your closet which mask to put on for that day, and it's just exhausting, and I was tired of being fake. So I decided, you know what? Fuck all that. Like, I need someone to teach me. So I started, and I know I have like the mentorship series launched already, but in that series I talk about like I was surrounded myself with mentors for everything because I wanted to learn. I wanted to be taught. I wanted to be the best at whatever I was doing. And in order to do that, you have to learn from the people before you. That's the only way. There's no shortcut, As a matter of fact, that is in a way a shortcut because what people rather do is try to find their own way. And then that's like the long way. It's like, they try to find a shortcut their own way and it becomes like the long way. How many people instead of looking at the GPS to try to find like the shortest route, they're like, nah, I know where to get there. And then all of a sudden you're making the wrong turn and like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be the case. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, again, accountability. So people need to start taking accountability for their actions. And in order to do that, what does accountability look like? Accountability is you taking responsibility for you and not also going, well, he's also at fault. No, just worry about you. Like, let life deal with that. Let God deal with that, whatever that is. Whoever else is at fault or whatever, don't worry about that. You worry about you. So, there's been times on stream where I have said some things and people were like, yo, man, like, I didn't appreciate that. And I took accountability for it because it's the shortest way to the solution. Stop trying to make excuses because now not only are you making that problem worse than what it is, when you take accountability, you stop the problem. You don't become the problem and spread it. You stop the problem right there. You're like, okay, cool. Now, I will say that there are times where people will keep digging the knife in you. At that point, now they're the problem and not you because you did your part, right? You ain't got to do nothing else. If they don't want to, forgive you, then that's now it's on them because you have already taken accountability. If they keep pressing the issue, a few years back I had a situation where a guy didn't like what I said on stream. I said I'm sorry, and he goes like, "No, you keep doing that shit. You keep doing that shit." It's like, what are you talking about? You just said so yourself. That only happened once, and I don't talk about you like that. So but like I said, I took accountability. I said, you know what? I'm sorry. I remember now what you're talking about, but that only happened that one time. And I didn't even mention your name. You got offended. I just apologized. And he kept digging the knife. And eventually we don't talk because he's out of my life. He's a very toxic individual and very, he's just a like egomaniac, So like I said, I personally just let it go. And at that point, you've already taken your accountability, you've apologized, you changed your behavior, and boom, done. That's it. But that's all you can really do, you know. So, but yeah, this concludes episode 2. I hope you guys enjoyed the content today. Be sure to be accountable today with something. All right, make sure you tell somebody you love them, and we'll see you guys in episode 3.